is excited to be hosting events every Thursday over the month of October to celebrate Islamic Heritage Month. Next Thursday evening, October 22nd, is our Family Arts Night, with the following Thursday, October 29th, being our STEM night: science, technology, engineering, and math. Please feel free to join us. It is not too late to register. We are at www.wearemend.ca. I would now like to pass you along to Babatunde, this evening's guest panelist.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Liz, for the land acknowledgement, and for all of us joining here virtually. I just want to quickly recognize all peoples around the world who are currently dealing with oppression, systemic oppression, be they Indigenous, Black, or otherwise. If we could have a quick moment, a brief moment of solidarity for all peoples who are dealing with oppression, and those of us who are eagerly and ardently fighting against that oppression. Thank you very much. I want to quickly welcome you all here tonight. It is indeed a pleasure to have our attendees here and our panelists here as we embark on a conversation that is long, long overdue, and a conversation that often is approached with a level of stigma and a level of discomfort. Though for those who are experiencing that discomfort, I hope tonight will be an opportunity for you to hear from the voices of people who stand at the intersection of Black and Muslim, and people who also just identify themselves as Black and have experience with the education system, as well as with anti-Black racism throughout their experiences living in Canada and the GTA, and their experiences in school. Some of these experiences have been positive, and some of these experiences have been negative. But we're here today to flesh out and hear these stories, and at the end of this conversation, hopefully come to some sort of conclusions and action items, so that this event isn't just a drop in the bucket, but this event can create waves of change that will permeate our lives and the existence of students all across the Durham District School Board. That being said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Kiera Rainford. Kiera is a grade 8 student in Durham who is of Jamaican descent and identifies as a Black female. She is passionate about the Black Lives Matter movement, equity and social justice work, as well as sports, her favorite being volleyball. Kiera sees herself as a listener and a learner, and is continuing to develop her understanding of different intersectional Black experiences. Kiera hopes to use her platform to raise awareness about anti-Black racism in education and to promote positive and empowering narratives about Black communities and cultures. Next, we have Delana Paris. Delana is a French immersion teacher in Durham of Trinidadian and Barbadian descent, and who identifies as a Black female. Equity finds itself at the core of her educational philosophy and drives her approach to pedagogy. Within the education system, her focus is on collaborating with other educators and community members to address systemic barriers, to engage all students in social justice and citizenship education, and to empower students to develop confidence in their identities and to leverage their voices. In the words of James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but everything can be changed until it is faced. Next, we have Riaz Saliu, also a student in Durham. Riaz identifies as a Black Muslim and currently is at a DDSB school in Whitby. The school he attends is a place where he has been for 2 years, and he has just entered into his junior year and looks forward to talking to you all about his experiences as a Black male and a Muslim in school. We also have Soraya Douglas. Soraya Douglas is a Black Muslim woman born in Toronto and raised in Peel. She hails from a long line of amazing women, namely her grandmother, Clotilda Douglas Yakimchuk, and her mother, Sharon Douglas. Soraya obtained a law clerk diploma at Seneca College in 2003 and worked at Adnan and Jeb law firm for a year. Shortly thereafter, she obtained team assistant position work for the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, presently named the Mississauga-Halton Local Health Integration Network. She was one of the first members of the Diversity Committee, and helped to facilitate discussions around diversity within the workplace. This mother of two remained in her position until September 2019, when she took a huge leap of faith and went back to school full-time to obtain a degree in social work at Ryerson University. She is an advocate for Black youth and hopes to do great things in the near future. And now. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Saada Awali Gad, who is somebody that I've known for many years and has worked in many grassroots initiatives across the GTA, dealing with issues of anti-oppression, anti-Black racism, and Islamophobia. Sada is currently an educator with the Toronto District School Board. She is also a parent to a child in the Durham District School Board, and has a very unique perspective or has two multiple unique perspectives tonight in terms of her role as an educator and her experiences as an educator, but also her experiences as a mother within the Durham District School Board. Myself, my name is Babatunde Tiamu, and I am an educator with the Durham District School Board, and I am excited to be your moderator tonight. I think we are going to have a fantastic conversation led by these courageous individuals who have taken a step here to share their stories tonight. I'm glad that we have our attendees, and I believe we're ready to go. I wanted to start by just fielding this question to our panel. With regards to the idea of anti-Black Islamophobia and the presence of discrimination and oppression and lateral oppression, the lateral oppression that exists within the Muslim community, when we think about Arab an Arab supremacy or a South Asian community supremacy, and the erasure or the idea that Black Muslims within Muslim spaces feel surveilled, but also feel invisible, or hyper surveilled, but also feel invisible. I wanted to talk about how that kind of anti-Black racism within the Muslim community, but within the general community, extends from the level of the systems to our individual lives. If we could start with one of our students, I'd like to hear from Kiera. If you want to just share how your experience dealing with anti-Black racism from a level of the system to your everyday life has affected you and your feelings.
Hi. The way anti-Black racism affects me and my feelings, it really, it looks like a weight on my back every time I join a new class or have a new teacher, because they're expecting me to fail or expecting me to be not as smart as the other kids. I'm also put weights on whenever I'm buying items in a store, or even doing regular things that people who are non-POC wouldn't have to think about if they weren't seen as threatening. For example, Madame Paris is telling me about how she went running and then she put her hood on because it was cold, and she had to rethink about that because she didn't want to be seen as threatening. Me personally, I've had to speak more educated whenever I'm speaking with a larger group of people, so that I don't seem as the ghetto Black woman, or speak at a lower tone voice and at a more moderate voice, even when I'm angry, because I don't want to be seen as ghetto and ratchet or something like that.
Interesting. Do you feel, it sounds as though that there's an added pressure on you, to maybe be a performative Black person, or you have to behave a certain way in order to not be judged or stereotyped. To any of my other panelists, do you feel that this is a shared experience, something that you've endured or had to endure, or had to perform in your educational experience or just in everyday life?
Yeah, for me, in the everyday life, to be honest, just walking to the store, even running, because one time I went on a run, right? And I had my hoodie on. I had to rethink everything. Just what happens if the police just pull up right there and they see me as a threat? What happens if I get shot? How is my mom, how is my parents, how is my whole family gonna react to that? And it's it really has you really thinking. It's why is this actually happening? Why can't like we just live in peace, you know? Like, why can't I just go to a store, walk in, and not be followed all the time? Like, not be singled out all the time just because of the color of my skin. So it's just, yeah, it's something to think about. And hopefully we can come to a conclusion to help solve the problem. And yeah, just help try to just come to an end point, to a point where we don't have to feel pressured anymore. We don't have to feel those type of like fear, those type of emotions.
You know, I can empathize, and I totally understand that fear, and it manifests itself in the workplace sometimes, even for me, where we have situations where I mean I can talk about walking into a school as a supply teacher and getting the keys, signing into the daybook at the school, and receiving the keys to my classroom, and then having a secretary um, follow me from the office to my classroom to make sure that I went to that space. And you know, these are experiences that we have in the Durham District School Board. But to my parent panelists here, um, can you speak or elaborate on how these types of experiences manifest themselves in your day to day, as well as parents, how they manifest in your children's day to day?
Um, so I could speak on that. Um, for my daughter, who is a Black child and also a Muslim child, I see that there's a lot of things that she's trying to juggle, and a lot of the times certain questions come up because of how other children treat her. So a lot of the conversations that her and I have will be about her hair texture. And the reason why we end up having a discussion about her hair texture is she'll have a lot of kids who are at her school and who are constantly commenting at her hair, whether they're talking about the thickness or the texture. And so I feel bad because she always has to be navigating these or having these deep conversations that I feel that it's unfair for an 8-year-old to be having. But she's forced to grow up much faster, and she's forced to have these difficult conversations with myself or even with her friends when she's explaining to her that she doesn't do Halloween, or she doesn't do trick-or-treating, or she doesn't celebrate Christmas, which is something that's constantly thrown into our children's faces when they're at school, whether there's presentations or whether they're learning about traditions. They're very much learning about the mainstream traditions. So I'm forced to really do a lot of work with my daughter so that she can walk into the schools and hold her head high, because many teachers are not doing that work. They're not helping her feel like she's accepted as a Black child and as a Muslim child. So I find it that, I signed up for this role because this is my child and I love her and I want her to walk through life, with confidence. But I feel that it would be really helpful that when she goes to school, that she's getting this confidence from her teachers and she's getting this confidence from her principals and her vice principals, but it's not happening, unfortunately.
Soraya, did you want to speak about your experiences with Peel District School Board and your children?
Unfortunately, likewise, I've had many of the same experiences when it comes to my son. He's 15, and he goes to school here in Peel. From being or trying to be streamed into applied courses, to being asked to, without even just like accusing him of misbehaving, like, Zach, make sure you behave when you come to class. He's like, why are you even saying that to me? Have I ever misbehaved? So they're kind of like labeled as bad. Going on his lunch to eat lunch at the plaza and being told that you can't enter the store, or being followed by the staff. And I think just most importantly, feeling like the teachers in the school don't think that, in my son's case, like, don't think that they're smart enough, or don't give them that boost, or that boost of kind of like a confidence, or that they believe in them and that they can do anything that they put their minds to. They stream them or push them to the side and make them feel like they're not. And that's been my experience, unfortunately, with my son.
Hmm. They're definitely seen as an afterthought.
Yes.
They learn about, you know, Eid, or they learn about Hanukkah, or they learn about these traditions, or they learn about, you know, different parts of the world as an afterthought.
Or for one
It's
month.
not, or for 1 month, and
Right.
it's not something that is put into the curriculum, and it's not something that is put into conversations that, you know, teachers overall are having
Yeah.
about the diversity of all these children.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the population is so diverse. Like when I asked Zach, you know, who's in your class, he's in a class full of a lot of children who are from diverse backgrounds, but the teachers are not. So the teachers are not from diverse backgrounds. They don't know how it is, and they don't understand when the students are speaking to them about their experiences, and they don't have training. So, yeah.
I, I wonder if Delana can weigh in here as an educator and speak to some of the things that educators who may be listening can do to rectify the fact that parents don't feel like their children's identities are adequately identified in their classroom, whether that be through curriculum or whether that be through conversations. Delana, if you could just weigh in and give us your opinion on things you do in your classroom, because we know you have a very dynamic classroom with a wonderful group of students. Your colleagues speak very highly of you. If you could give us just some insight to things that you do in your classroom, in your space, in your school, in your community even, that help bring the identity of your students to the forefront.
You're gonna make me blush there. I do have to say though that as an educator, for me, something that is so powerful is taking moments like this to be able to listen to the voices of our students. Kiara and Riaz, I applaud you for the courage that you're demonstrating tonight and sharing your stories. And also taking that time to be able to listen to parents, to listen to families, to understand the experiences that they are having, and you know what they're seeing as their children are navigating the school system. And so sometimes, you know, just taking those moments to be able to learn, right? That's what helps us to be able to grow as a community. So I do want to thank everybody for just being so open and honest and for sharing your stories tonight, for sure. You know, and as educators, I think that something, you know, and also just as community members, I think that something that we all have to remember is that equity is not something that is linear. It's not a linear process. It's something that is not going to be straightforward. There's no manual on how to get it right the first time. And so I think that, you know, it's being willing to take those risks, to think outside of the box, to look to you know, different community sources to be able to grow and to be able to learn, right? And then to take those risks in the classroom. Get to know your students, get to know their families, find out what's important to the people in your classroom. And also, you know, when we're looking at curriculum, there's so many opportunities to be able to engage in critical thinking, to be able to engage in social justice education. It's all there. And when we're more aware of our unconscious biases, right, then we're able to interpret that curriculum in different ways that will hopefully resonate with our students in empowering ways. So.
Fantastic. And, you know, when you mention the fact that equity is not a linear process, I think sometimes as an educator myself, we get bogged down in the idea that maybe what we're doing, when we're going to get it wrong, we're not going to hit the nail on the head the first time. And that can be discouraging. And, you know, I'm encouraged to say that, you know, the Durham District School Board is making strides in shout out to MEND for hosting this event to give us the platform to actually speak these things, and to share these opinions. But once again, you mentioned empowerment, Delana, and the importance of empowering those voices. So I'm going to continue to do that by phrasing our next question to our students here, our students, and empowering the student voice. And I wanted to ask, just as a student, how does it feel, or what are your thoughts about speaking out against anti-racism or speaking out against Islamophobia within your school space, and the worry of backlash or reprimand from people of privilege and authority within that space, from your peers, from your teachers, from the administration in your schools? How, as students, and we can start with Riaz, if you want to just weigh in on how, as a student, you feel just with regard to that fear, that fear that might prevent you from speaking your truth, or feeling empowered, or what can empower you to feel more comfortable about speaking your truth.
Something that really scares me is just being taken out of context and being feared. And if I accidentally raise my voice, are they gonna just screech back or anything? Or if I say this, how will they react? Will they completely ignore me, or will they actually listen? Because sometimes not all people try to listen to you because they don't want to hear it themselves. So what I think would actually help is the teachers actually making sure and explaining these issues to the other students as well, because it's in a place of authority, I think, because they're not going to listen to a person they think is the same as them. They're going to listen to a person who's of higher status. So if the teacher talks about it, then I have more strength, more courage to actually speak out about these things, because the teacher has already put the word in the air, and the conversation can go from there, and people will actually listen to me. And once one student gets their voice out, it's just going to be like a spread. Everyone's going to start talking about it. Everyone's going to start talking the issues in our community as a whole. And yeah, everyone's just it's going to be like a whole conversation, and we'll actually be able to understand each other.
I agree. And I think it's important to note, and that you mentioned that fear of speaking up too loudly, and potentially being perceived as something that you're not, even though you're just you're explaining, or you're explaining something in a situation that might have made you feel uncomfortable, and you have that right to advocate for yourself. But the fact that you have to, you feel that because of your race, you have to temper how you self-advocate and how you communicate your pain and your discomfort, is troubling. Kiera, have you had situations where you found yourself oppressed, or you found yourself in a situation where you weren't being treated fairly, and you felt that it was based on your race? How have you managed to speak your truth in the context of your school and your community?
Honestly, it's nerve-wracking to speak my truth in front of so many people, in front of the whole class, when the teacher questions you in front of everybody, because you don't want to mess up, because that'll make them think that you're below the standard they want you to be at. So personally, a certain teacher started speaking about Black Lives Matter in not a degrading way, but in kind of like she was trying to get a check off a checkbox rather than it being a discussion. So it was nerve-wracking for me to speak up and tell her that she was in the wrong for something that she was doing. I didn't want my peers and other people to think that I'm taking things too seriously, or I'm just or I can't take a joke or something. But it's harder to get my voice out there when I'm constantly being when I'm constantly being put down by other people and by just the thoughts in my brain and the trigger in my brain that's telling me what not to and what to say. Because if I slip up, then and if I say like something that's wrong or can be perceived as rude, I'm getting sent straight to the office and suspended without a second thought. Because I'm seen as threatening, or I'm seen as more rude than some of the other people and than some of my counterparts would be.
Again, we have situations where there's feelings of pain and discomfort. There's this fear that around being able to advocate for yourself. So there's this double this double feeling of fear, where one, you're in a position where you're being targeted for your race, and two, you're potentially being targeted again for speaking out and advocating for yourself. I wonder if one of our educators, Sada or Delana, or both of you could just speak to ways that we can empower students in the classroom to comfortably self-advocate for themselves, and what advice you would give to other educators when a student approaches them, how they could receive a student who approaches them when they feel that they are being inappropriately targeted because of their race.
As I'm listening to these two students speak, my heart breaks, because it's really unfortunate that that much weight is put on your backs, and that you have to be thinking about these things rather than going to school and being educated and having fun with your friends. And it's really unfortunate that that weight is on your back, and that you have to defend yourself the way that you have to defend yourself, or even the fact that you have to think about these things. But kudos to you guys. You're doing an amazing job. And, I really have a lot of respect for you guys as I'm hearing you speak. And your voices really matter. They really matter. As one of the few Black teachers at my school, and the only Muslim teacher at my school, I think that my voice matters and my presence matters at the school. I know that there's not that many Muslim students at my school, and whenever I'm at yard duty, I have literally just 10 kids who are just following me around, asking me questions about, when you fast, do you do this? And what do you eat after you break fast? And they're just looking for somebody to relate to them, somebody to give them that voice to be like, you are not different, and there's, and what you believe in is not, it's not shameful, and it's not taboo. And so I know that my voice is important and my presence there is important. And so I'm very mindful of how I use my voice, and empowering students is incredibly important, because they are the next generation, and they are individuals that we need to fight for as teachers, because there are many teachers and many leaders who are not fighting for them, and who are leaving them behind, and who are seeing them as somebody who is just filling up space rather than somebody who can contribute to our society and to our schools. So I'm a huge believer at, when you see any students who need assistance, even if they're in your class, or even if they're not in your class, and you are just seeing that they need some assistance, or they're constantly being picked on by a principal or by another teacher, then I see it as my responsibility to step up. And I have in many occasions, and I have been, seen as that teacher who's constantly making, unnecessary noise. And to me, I don't care, because at the end of the day, those are my children, and those are students that I feel need to be taken care of. And so if I have to put myself on the line, I will do so. And so I do believe that we need to protect our students, and we need to protect our students that are vulnerable. And And unfortunately, that is children of color and children who are visibly, showing that they're Muslim or they're Jewish or they're Sikh or whatever it is. Those are students that are constantly, their voices are being taken by them. And so I think that as teachers, it's really important that we are constantly advocating for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I find that there's what you're saying resonates also with my experience as an educator in schools and seeing students who have been marginalized and doubly marginalized, where they fall at various intersections, whether they be Black and Muslim or whether they be a student who identifies as Black and LGBTQ plus, and not having that voice to advocate or to not having that voice from amongst staff to really pull for them when they're feeling down. And I'm wondering if, Delana, if you could weigh in on ways that we can empower other educators to, or how other educators can receive students who have these issues.
So I was just going to add there that, for example, I think something that's really important that that educators can do is to help to create a safe space, right, in your classrooms, whether that's establishing norms or however, or expectations, or however it is that you would like to go about doing it. But when we create those safe spaces, right, it helps students as well as educators to be able to reflect on how they're moving through that space, right, and whose voices are being heard and whose voices are not necessarily being heard. So that way we can look to amplify those voices in those spaces. I think also representation, like you said, is important, and I think it goes beyond the physical the physical representation of human representation in the classroom, but I think also the types of books that we're using, right, the types of images that we're showing, the resources that we're able to present, all of that type of representation, right, plays into creating that safe space, because it shows our students, look, there's a place for you here, right? I can see myself in this book or in that lesson or however it may be. And so that definitely is really important. And also just that constant reflection, right? Reflecting on our own identities, right? And the intersections of those identities. So then that way, when we're met with another person, whether it be a community member, a family, a parent, a student, another educator, right, who's presenting a view that is perhaps different to what you might know, right? Well, it helps you to become more aware if you're conscious of that identity that you carry, right? And in a sense, I like to think of it as becoming aware of your blind spots, right? And so when someone presents that information to you, right? Maybe they're advocating for themselves, or maybe they're helping you to understand something, that is unfamiliar to your own experience, right? You can recognize that as a blind spot and not necessarily as a criticism, right? But it's just a blind spot where maybe that's where you can look now and put some more attention, right? And hopefully to be able to grow. And I think that also relates back to what I had said earlier about taking opportunities like these to listen and learn from voices that may be different to your own.
Delana, what you just said reminds me of a quote from Nelson Mandela, and he once said that in speaking about leadership, we don't care if the cat is black or white. What we're concerned with is whether or not that cat can catch mice. And really and truly, when you speak about ways that teachers who might not reflect the student population can still represent the idea of representation, how they can still represent students within their classrooms through curriculum, through books, and just even through imaging. The idea or the concept of representation is something that is often underlooked in educational spaces. And I'm wondering, as a parent, if Soraya, if you could just comment on how important it is for you to know that your child's identity is going to be represented in the classroom. And also, if you could share some of your experience where, you know, your children haven't, even when they've met somebody who maybe identifies as Black or identifies as Muslim, but that person hasn't quite been able to represent them or hasn't quite been able to advocate for them. How important is it for you as a parent to have people around your son or your daughter in school who are able to adequately represent them?
um it's everything, right? Like, as a mother, my kids are everything to me, and I send them to school, and which means I have to be able to trust the teachers and the staff at the school with my child, right? And um representation is huge. Like, I think it's very important for children to see themselves in the lessons and in the books that they're reading, and most importantly in the staff. But I'd also like to think from a humanity perspective that it doesn't matter what the teacher looks like. I hope that educators and principals and vice principals um, know at this point that, you know, you're working with children, like they're kids at the end of the day, right? And I it hurts me and it breaks my heart to hear Kiera and Riaz say that they've been through exactly what my son Zach has been through, feeling unheard, feeling like you're under a lens all the time, and like you can't be yourself, you can't speak, right? Like, who wants to go to school? How do you learn in that type of environment? So for me, it's hard to hear because I know that my own son has gone through that. And I also want my son to speak for himself, to advocate for himself, but a lot of times he doesn't. And for example, he was in his English class and he was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and he couldn't believe that they were using the N-word. He came home and he's like, "Mom, would you believe that I'm reading a book and the book, like, the people are saying the N-word?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." He's like, "Have you ever read this book before?" I said, "Yeah, well, all have read this book in school." He's like, "Mom, it's so wrong." And I said, "What did you say to your teacher?" He's like, "I didn't say anything." I said, "Why didn't you say something?" He's like, "I don't know. I thought, you know, that she would be upset." So in that moment, really what I wanted to say was like, "Zach, you got to speak for yourself." But he just didn't feel that it was a safe space. And so I just want the kids to have safe spaces where they can voice how they're feeling. I want there to be options. They shouldn't have to be forced to read or learn materials that are maybe hurtful or offensive or demeaning to them, because Zach said that other children in the class started using the N-word and laughing. And, you know, they're reading in a book, so they're thinking, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But it's really important that the kids are heard, and that I can trust the staff at the school to listen to my son when I'm not there to speak for him.
That breaks my heart. That it's hard not to be angry, as a Black man, as a student who's traversed the education system here in the GTA, as a student, as an educator, as a teacher candidate. These instances happen far too often, where educators are ill-equipped to deal with these type of experiences, and as they happen on the ground, as they happen in real time, where students are left feeling alienated because of the subject matter, because of the content of what they're learning. um, I, I
May
want
I
to
add
I want to
something, Atunde?
sorry, yep.
May I add something? I just want to add quickly at the end that I made an appointment with the teacher and the vice principal. And when I went into the school, I want everyone to know that even though I said my son was uncomfortable with the literature and that he didn't think it was right, they would not substitute the book. They said to me, "This is great literature and he has to read it." And I said, "It's great literature from whose lens?"
Mm.
And they were not going to bend. So I just want to say, like, these are the changes that we have to advocate for. Like, there needs to be change.
Absolutely,
And sorry,
absolutely.
I just wanted to just, you said that you wished your son to, you know, stand up for himself, but
Yeah.
he knows the space. He knows the space, hence why he is finding it difficult to, because now you go there and yet the response is still the same.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy, to be quite honest. I want to hear from our students. What are ways, what can we do? What can our educators do? And what advice can you give our educators really to, you know, in your experiences, have you come across situations where, you know, there have been situations in the class where your educator has been ill-equipped to deal with, you know, anti-Black racism or Islamophobia in your classroom? What kind of experiences have you endured? And what advice could you give to an educator to make you feel more comfortable in that situation?
I guess my advice would just be to stop and actually listen to what the student's trying to say. Don't cut them off, and don't try to insert your opinion when they're spreading theirs. Insert your opinion after they've already finished their statement. And also to not just to listen, but to learn from your mistakes. So learn that you shouldn't do that next time, and to then apply it later. So apply what the student hopefully has taught you wrong, and then continue to do that for the next classes and the next sessions. And don't just put it off like some other lesson that's not like some math lesson or something.
Sorry, go ahead, Riaz.
So like in the classroom, there's like they're talking about something on the news, like a recent bombing or anything, and they're literally offending my culture, my religion, right? And the teacher would just listen in and not butt in or do anything to even control the situation to make them stop. And I had to go in and say something like, can you please stop talking about this? This isn't what represents me, what represents my culture. And the fact that the teacher didn't really do anything really was, it really hurt me, because I thought, like, just some advice, just whenever you see a student in that situation, just stand up for them, and say something to the other students, because they're even like some people aren't as strong. I don't mean to sound like promoting or anything, but some people aren't even as strong as me to even say anything, and just stay there and listen to all of the bad things they're saying about their people, their family, and they'll just stay there, and just for the teacher to say something could be like detrimental to them. Like, yes, this is wrong, and it needs to be just fixed, and it needs to be so there needs to be a solution to this, where people aren't talking about these things. People aren't disrespecting others because of the color of their skin or their religion. It's just needs to be recognized by the teacher, and actually said to the students.
You know, it really, really, really makes me happy to know that we have students in the DDSB who do feel empowered to speak, who were courageous enough to join us on this conversation. And, you know, I think a point that Kiera made, teachers need to listen and learn. You know, as educators, we know that, you know, learning is a lifelong journey. And that in our classroom, you know, the second teacher is our students, and learning from their experiences, and trying to implement what they tell you. When they do come to you, when they do find the courage to speak to you about how they may be feeling about the way something was discussed in class, is important. And I'm proud of Kiera, and I'm proud of Riaz for being able to share their experiences today. We are a little short on time, but I just wanted to hear from all of our panelists again with regards to what we feel, how we feel about how the response that our school boards has been to anti-Black racism within the context of to anti-Black racism and Islamophobia within the context of all that has gone on in the media within the GTA. We've heard about mosques being attacked. We've heard about the long list of Black men and women in Canada and the United States and in Europe who have been the victims of anti-Black racism and police brutality and systemic racism as a whole. And we've heard a bit about how systemic racism manifests itself in our classrooms, but I would just like for you guys to elaborate a little bit more on what the responses have been from your collective school boards and your school communities with regards to anti-Black racism.
I can chime in on there. As a parent of a student or a child who is in the Durham District School Board, and as an educator of the TDSB board, I definitely think that not enough has been done. I am actually quite concerned and saddened by the fact that there hasn't been anything, and a lot of, which is understandable, but a lot of the shift has gone to talking about COVID and talking about what we need to do to keep our schools safe and our schools specifically safe. And we've completely neglected talking about what is happening around the world and how Black people are being crucified and are being killed on the street and are being literally by just civilians in the stores being, police officers and literally, walking and stalking and criminalizing Black bodies because they feel that they have the right to, because as a country and as a nation, we've allowed that to happen. We've allowed it to happen that Black bodies don't matter. And as a board as whether it's Durham District School Board or whether it's Peel or whether it's TDSB, there's a large population of Black children and children of color, and so to completely disregard the lived experiences of these students is really saddening and really despicable, because we don't know how, like, my child was crying when she was seeing the news every single day, and she was scared to go outside because she believed that she was going to get killed. And all our students have been sitting with this information, all these feelings for 6 months. They've been sitting literally in their homes, and they've been stuck in their homes for 6 months, and then they've been stuck with the world hates you because of your color. And then as educators, as a board, we did nothing. We didn't do training, we didn't have conversations, we did not protect our community. And as an educator and as a parent, I can say that we have dropped the ball. And we have not been speaking about it, and we haven't uplifted these voices, these children, to really talk about how has these 6 months affected you in terms of how you've seen Black bodies being affected, or how do you get affected when your community is being targeted, the masjid that you go to. So.
Sad, a powerful words, extremely powerful words. I second the idea that we've dropped the ball. From what I've seen, there isn't enough. We haven't dealt with enough. But anyways, I would like to hear from Soraya, if you could talk to the response, or how you feel about the response in your children's schools.
I thought about this for a couple of days about the response that has taken place. I was watching the news this morning and listened to Minister Lecce say that he spoke to a Black student that said to him, I went through my whole elementary and high school and only had one Black teacher. I think at the end of the day, the discussions are great. I think only the same people attend the discussions. And I think that in order for this to be taken seriously, there has to be accountability. I think senior staff, principals, vice principals, and then the teachers all have to be held accountable for their actions. What I mean by that, if a teacher is standing by and watching a child in Riaz's class be bullied and racially profiled the teacher allows that, the teacher there has to be a consequence. When there's no consequences, I think at this point, training's not mandatory. Training should be mandatory. There has to be accountability. I think that in performance management appraisals that the senior staff have every year, they have to be questioned about what have you done in regards to leadership. What have you done with your staff? Are your staff trained? Are you hiring Black staff? What's in your curriculum? What are you guys teaching? I think that at this point, people have to be held accountable, because volunteering and putting out seminars that people are just like, they can come if they want to, it doesn't work. It has to be mandatory, and there needs to be accountability. Not enough. I don't even, like, from when I went to school, I'm Canadian born, and I went to elementary school, high school, college, and now in university, and it's still the same. And my child is 15 and he's going through the same thing. So not enough has been done. Staff need to be held accountable. That's what I think.
Thank you, Soraya. Delana, did you want to weigh in?
Yes. Wow. Once again, just listening to what everybody has to share, you know, I'm listening to it, but I'm also feeling everything that everyone is saying. So thank you again for sharing your stories. I would definitely say that, you know, something, just touching back a little bit to when the students were speaking just now, Kiara and Riaz, you know, when they say they wish that their teachers saw, right, what is occurring in their everyday experiences at school. And I have to say that something that I've learned as I have matured, become more vintage, shall we say, is that we need people to unlearn their biases so that they can see those issues, right? So that because the experiences, right, that people are navigating are definitely not interpreted the same way by other individuals, especially if they're coming from a different intersectional background, right? So that bias can actually be blinding. And so what we need to do as a community is to be able to put in that work, to be able to unlearn those biases, so that way we can become more aware. We can see, you know, the experiences that others are having. Something that I often tell my students is, you know, just because something's not a problem for you doesn't mean it's not a problem for somebody else, right? So when we can develop that empathy and when we can grow that and learn about it, then suddenly, right, those blinders start to widen and we can become more aware of those everyday experiences that our students, that our staff, that our families are experiencing within the same spaces, right? Because you can have two people in the same space having very different experiences. And so I think that is definitely something for all community members, right, to be aware of. And I think that's something that we can each do, right? Regardless of whether we're in education or not. I would also say that, you know, when it comes to the response, you know, I, as a Black woman, right, I have experienced much having to do with anti-Black racism, right, from a child up to today, right, both personally and also professionally. And so, you know, in June, right, when on the news everything was so heightened with George Floyd, I personally felt as though, you know, I wanted to act. There was something that I wanted to do. I knew that, you know, I wanted to be able to do something more, right? To be able to engage in that conversation. And I have to say, I was so grateful when reaching out to our school board to be, that there were facilitators and superintendents who were wanting to engage in that conversation, who were promoting the work, right? And that took the time to be able to listen and to collaborate. And I think that that was something that can be very rare in a lot of spaces. And so it was definitely, I was definitely greatly appreciated. I definitely greatly appreciated that leadership that I was able to experience from those members of our school board. And I know that, you know, over the summer, our school board hosted an Unlearn conference, right? Which was specifically trying to help to provide that training, right? But while we have certain procedures or policies, right, that'll trickle down, we also have to have some that come from the ground up, because I think it's so important to hear from families, because that lets us know what's translating, right? What's coming through, what's coming across. And so, you know, please keep telling your stories, right? Because that, again, lets us know where our blind spots are, so that then we as educators know where we need to be maybe directing our attention more, right?
Thank you, Delana. Before I comment on that, I just want to hear lastly from our students. We do have a short amount of time before we're kicked off. I know we told people that we'd go until 8, and I appreciate all of our attendees who've kept on, who've come along on this journey and listened the entire way through. If I could hear just from our students and empowering their voices, do you feel, how has the response been for you guys? How, like, in your day-to-day experience as students in the DDSB, do you feel that some of the trainings that Delano just mentioned, do you feel that they've been received by your staff? Do you feel like we've done enough? If we could just weigh in quickly, because really and truly, at the end of the day, if we're not all at the same point on this continuum and on our learning journeys, and as educators, we all have different entry points. But how would you just feel overall that the response has been?
I feel like they haven't done enough, but they're they're starting at least. And that's what we need, is to start the journey, to take one step on the stair flight, just to start and receive and try to find a solution. So they're not there yet, but I am happy that they're trying to get there. They're at least showing effort instead of just completely ignoring it, right? So I'm just glad that they're actually taking this step.
Yeah, going off.
Go ahead, Kiera.
Yeah, going off of what Riaz said, yeah, they're obviously not at the best at where they need to be, but they're starting. They are at a point where they are noticing that there is something wrong with the system, and they are trying to fix it, and that's fantastic. They're noticing the problems and they're trying to fix them, which I completely and 100% stand for. My hope is that students who are in kindergarten will grow up and not have the bias and the internalized misogyny that we have now, and that certain things are wrong and certain things are right. And yeah.
Kiara, Riaz, Sada, Delana, Soraya, thank you all for sharing your voice. One common thread that I picked up from that is, the idea of continuous learning. And, we talked about mandatory training. Soraya mentioned that we have mandatory health training. Why, if anti-Black racism and anti-Black Islamophobia are things that impact the health and well-being of our students, why aren't these trainings just as important as health and safety measures being mandatory for educators, that type of training being mandatory for educators? Why aren't the identities of our students protected just as much as their health and safety? That being said, we're going to wrap up here. Thank you all for joining us and listening. Again, this is one conversation that shouldn't just be a drop in the bucket. I'm hoping that the administrators that are listening are in a position and have been moved enough by today's conversation that they feel that more needs to be done. And, our parents, our students, are not satisfied, and you know, the direction that we're heading in is the right one, but more needs to be done. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you for tuning in. It's indeed been a pleasure. And we hope, thanks again to MEND for putting on this event and giving our parents, giving these students the opportunity to speak their truth on a platform. Thank you.